Free agency is alive and well, people. Malik Willis, new Dolphins QB1. We got Kenneth Walker, the Chiefs. Travis Etienne, the highest running back in the league in terms of total salary, to the Saints. All that much, much more, guys. We are reacting to any and all fantasy relevant free agent signings. You are watching the Fantasy Life Show. Rocking and rolling today with Mr. Dwain McFarland in the house. Dwain, happy Monday. Happy free agency. Football's in the air, my man.
Happy Monday. Yeah, absolutely love it. And great job to you. Anybody that hasn't checked it out yet, go over to fantasylife.com. Ian has been crushing it today with instant reactions and what it means for fantasy football on all these players. You know, we'll talk about them all, Ian, but I know how you are. You probably have, what'd you do? Like 1,000 words on each of them?
My fingers are hurting like that grandma from Happy Gilmore back in the day. So no landscaping for me just yet, but certainly plan to get to. So with that, Dwayne, let's start with the top and the most important position in sports, and that will be quarterback, where the biggest fish, pun intended, ended up with the Dolphins here. Malik Willis and the Dolphins, 3 years, $67.5 million deal. Dwayne, $45 million is over the first 2 years. One of those contracts where it sounds like they can kind of get out of it at the, before 2028 if things go south. But hey, obviously, we talk a lot about Malik Willis over the past couple months, all the good passing efficiency stats that he's number one at. I actually had a solo video go live on the Fantasy Life YouTube channel if you guys want to, again, kind of get a more just clear-cut case for why Malik Willis had this market in the first place. But Dwayne, very optimistic, I would say, for Malik having this job, obviously, secured, given the money they sent, given the reality that they released Tua Tagovailoa. I'm cautiously optimistic we can get really excited about a legit late-round dual-threat quarterback again. That said, I still feel the scars from trusting Justin Fields a little bit too much last year. So how are you feeling about this signing, and how high is too high, do you think, to rank Willis ahead of 2026 drafts?
Well, number one, I'm just going to say, yes, you were wounded last year by Justin Fields, but your process was still right, because ultimately we do want the guys that can add value on the ground. It doesn't always work out. To your point, Malik Willis, it's a small sample, but he's been really good over these last couple of seasons in Green Bay. 23.4 fantasy points per game, guys, in 3 starts that he had. 5.6% of his passes resulted in touchdowns. Design rush attempts, 14%. That's absolutely elite. And then if you look at his scramble rate, 16%, also elite. So you look at it, we still have Jalen Waddle there. I know there's been some rumors around some of the Dolphins skill position players. But right now you have Waddle, you have Etienne. So I feel like you've got the weapons to work with. Ian, honestly, I think he's right there in a tier where you get to Matthew Stafford, you get to Kyler Murray, who I think I have at QB 16 right now. I updated my ranks earlier if you guys want to go see him. I've got Kyler at 15. I've got Malik Willis at 16. So, I mean, there's Mahomes, Stafford, Murray, Willis, then Bo Nix, and Jordan Love. And I could see an argument for pushing Kyler and Malik Willis above Stafford, right? Just because they are the dual threat guys. So, yeah, here's the big thing for the Dolphins, man. They get a young guy. Yes, it is a small sample, but there's a chance that they really did get a star quarterback. And that's what I love about this signing. I get it. They had to pay some money to do it. But if you look at all the other guys that are out there, it's like we've seen them long enough. At least with Malik Willis, it's like maybe there is this upside, and maybe they actually got him on the cheap.
Obviously, departing the always well-schemed Matt LaFleur offense in Green Bay is going to change things. But again, guys, there was a difference between what we saw from Willis in 2024, just like the most run-heavy offense in the league, a lot of just quick RPOs, get the ball out of your hand, play actions, versus what we saw again in a small sample, but in 2 games in 2025, really just throwing dart after dart downfield to guys like Romeo Doubs and Christian Watson. So echoing a lot of what Dwayne said, I do kind of think that's about the right range for him. I can't quite, Dwayne, as we sit here today on Monday in early March, get him ahead of guys like Matthew Stafford or Bo Nix. But I think once, you start running the projections and looking at it, man, 17 games from Malik Willis, it's going to be hard for this dude to bust. And the stat I've said before, and the stat I'm sure I'll say 100 times again this offseason, guys, out of 34 quarterbacks that have at least 100 rush attempts in a season since 2014, 31 of them, 91% finish inside the position's top 12. It's exciting, Dwayne, to actually have potentially 2 quarterbacks now in Kyler Murray and also Malik Willis, who, again, if they can just hang on to that job, really should be the sort of premier late round quarterbacks that, us fancy nerds can get really excited about.
Yeah, and I think the question you have to ask yourself when you get to Malik Willis, could he bust? Yes. So are you trying to draft a quarterback for their safe floor whenever you've taken a, hey, I'm going to wait on quarterback approach? I don't think that's the right strategy. I would rather go after a Malik Willis and say, I could be wrong. It could be completely nothing, but if I get it right, he could score 22, 23 fantasy points per game. That gives me a major advantage against people that took Josh Allen earlier in the draft, people that took Lamar Jackson. I'm suddenly closing the gap on them. While we like some of the pocket passers, we know how much it can fluctuate as far as they're so dependent on their passing touchdowns. Not saying Stafford's going to regress. The Rams are a really good offense, right? And we're going to see what all they do in free agency. Obviously updating their defensive room, nothing on offense yet. So I'm not saying you got to take him over them, but just when I get to that range, I'm like, can Bo Nix really score 22 and a half fantasy points per game? I think it's a stretch. Can Malik Willis do it? Yes. Is Bo Nix going to give me a better floor probably than Malik Willis? Yeah, I've seen him for 2 years do it. I don't have that with Willis, but man, I just love the upside.
Either way, man, the fact that we have guys like Bo Nix and Malik Willis potentially going this late in drafts, I mean, really more than ever, I think I'll be very willing to be patient at the quarterback position this year. But that again, obviously, biggest available free agent, regardless of position, was Malik Willis. Looking elsewhere, man, didn't see Marcus Mariota actually find his way into a starting job. A lot of people thought he could be a bridge guy. He's actually back with the Commanders on a 1-year, $7 million deal with some incentives for more. The other big, news, Dwain, would be the Dolphins again releasing Tua Tagovailoa, and then us getting words that actually he could be going to the Atlanta Falcons. So again, that seems to be where the rumors are right now. We also have obviously Kyler Murray set to hit free agency. Once the new league year officially starts on Wednesday, he's being rumored towards the Vikings. Again, we'll see how those two things shake out. But for me, Dwain, I'm not very moved by Tua going to the Falcons. I do think it's more evidence that Stefanski really doesn't necessarily trust or believe Michael Penix is going to be their long-term quarterback. But at the same time, they're going to be able to get this dude on a vet min deal, and Penix coming off that knee injury, like they do need to add someone as well. So any thoughts on Tua potentially becoming an Atlanta Falcon sooner rather than later?
Yeah, I think this, if it happens, it's just all good for Drake London, all of our skill position players there, and Bijan Robinson, because, while you might not think that Tua Tagovailoa is worthy of a huge contract and he's this major differentiator at the NFL level, the bottom line is when he's had good weapons around him, we've seen him actually be capable of supporting them. Right. And so I think that's the big thing here with the Falcons, whether it ends up being Penix or whether it ends up being Tua. That's either because Penix comes back from the injury and he has to be playing well enough to beat out Tua, which that's a good thing. But if not, we have a backstop, So I think that Tua actually would be a really interesting signing. Also, that would be two lefties at quarterback. So maybe there's something there.
Two lefties. Not the first time in NFL history, as I was quickly corrected over on the old Twitter sphere. People always seem to be in the know there, but certainly first time in a while there. So I'm with you. We have seen just, again, the wrong backup quarterback completely crater an entire offense. Even like the Jets last year, man, like Brady Cook, we just cannot do anything with that down, apologies to the Brady Cook family if you guys are tuning in, but certain situations, like just nothing goes right there. So no, I would not want my favorite team to be having Tua Tagovailoa or my fantasy team as QB1. You could do a lot worse than him as your backup. Thoughts on potentially, though, Dwain, Kyler Murray, someone who, again, we'll see what happens, but it seems like a lot of reports are indicating the Minnesota Vikings could be the front runner for his services, and that would obviously result in a battle between him and J.J. McCarthy. But just, we've been saying it all offseason, man, out of all these teams that needed a quarterback that realistically could start this year, Vikings easily the best landing spot, and God forbid we get Kyler partying like it's 2021 again, man. We could see some fantasy fireworks there if things work out.
Yeah, obviously, Kyler would have to have some improvements in his game. He is not great at seeing over the middle of the field, hitting those intermediate depth targets. That's a staple for Kevin O'Connell's offense. But I'll tell you what, man, I would just be willing to bet on this. Like, you're going to tell me that Kyler, who can still run around, not going to score all the rushing touchdowns, guys, like what we see with Josh Allen, as well as Jalen Hurts, guys like that. But, man, he could still pile on 500, 600 rushing yards. And in Kevin O'Connell's offense, who basically everyone on the planet, including, I think Ian had a tryout and threw for 350 yards in practice. Everyone except for J.J. McCarthy has actually been successful. Ian and I have played catch on a real football field. Remember that in Canton? We were out there trying to drop dimes to each other. Des Bryant was on the field with us, so we didn't look very good next to him, Ian. But yeah, man, if you get Kyler there, oh my God, like, can we keep him out of the top 12? I don't know that we'll be able to if he goes to the Vikings.
The one concern would be, all right, like we just talked about, these dual threat quarterbacks don't bust as long as they can keep the job. And obviously with just the opportunity cost and everything they've already invested in J.J. McCarthy, that is going to play a role in it. So ranking him, man, if we know Kyler's the week 1 starter and everything is just looking like the 9 era in Minnesota is over, I'm with you, man. It's going to be hard to move him up there. 2025 was rough, though, okay? You can find some stats, and I had, okay, EPA per dropback, he was 15th. That was actually ahead of Joe Burrow, Trevor Lawrence, Justin Herbert. That's a really good list of guys to be ahead of. PFF passing grade, even 22nd. That's ahead of Lamar Jackson, Baker Mayfield. So there are stats that paint last year as a positive light. There's a lot more that don't, Dwayne. As much as Marvin Harrison Jr., not a great wide receiver 1. I am concerned that we've seen the best from Kyler, but at the same time, you did mention it, like he can't see over the middle of the field. Apparently, they took that page out of their offense from J.J. McCarthy. So long story short, I totally get going top 12, like under the assumption of 17 games. I'm just not sure we can make that assumption.
Yeah, I think it's just an upside kind of thing. Like, are you willing to bet on the upside? Like, if you're playing best ball, I think it's a little trickier to your point until we have a better feel for it. My gut says, even though I'm with you, I don't think Kyler Murray is what we hoped that he would eventually be in the NFL. And I do see these NFL changes on defense and the way teams are playing. They are hurting Kyler Murray's game specifically. But at the same time, if you put him on the Vikings, like the upside is absolutely there where you could have a top 6 fantasy quarterback with Kevin O'Connell. So I'm probably going to be aggressive on it. Again, assuming that if I put him somewhere around the borderline of a QB1, that means someone's waiting on their QB1. So why not go ahead and take a roll of the dice? And the great thing is, by the time most of you are drafting a lot of your fantasy leagues, we're going to know the answer to this question, right? But I would say, where would you put the odds, Ian, that J.J. McCarthy is the starter for the Vikings if they sign Kyler Murray? I think it's got to be 30%. Like at least 2-1 in Kyler's favor. Yeah, so you're saying 3-1 in favor of Kyler. I think maybe so. We would say 2.5-1, right? If we're splitting it between us. I mean, I think Kyler would take the job.
I just think bringing in Kyler, that's someone who, hey, he has a good year. All of a sudden, he could be your franchise quarterback these next couple of years. Okay. We've heard some rumors like someone like Joe Flacco. Dwayne, I think if he brought in, the veteran like Flacco, could he take over eventually? Sure. Or a Geno Smith. But like a Geno or Flacco signing, that would be the situation where I would think, okay, they're probably going to let J.J. McCarthy try to run away with this job. And then they got the veteran if he fails.
Agree. But you at least want to see what you have with Kyler. Now, look, McCarthy could come out in training camp and be awesome. And that's how he saves his job. But he's going to have to do that with Kyler on board. So the big thing here is no matter what, this would be good for Vikings players, right? It's going to be good for Justin Jefferson. It's going to be good for Jordan Addison. It's going to be good for TJ Hawkinson, who reduced his deal to return, because that means JJ McCarthy either has to get better or we're going to at least see Kyler, right? So I think that's a positive.
Looking at kind of the QB landscape now with, again, some of these dominoes have fallen. The Raiders still reportedly want a veteran quarterback because they don't want to start Fernando Mendoza from week 1. Seems like a good job for someone like Geno Smith. I wonder if they try to make that work out. Steelers apparently still, hanging their hat on Aaron Rodgers coming back. We'll see what happens there. Colts have Daniel Jones on transition tag, tentatively expecting those guys to be filled. Dolphins, obviously, again, got Malik Willis, as we mentioned. Arizona Cardinals, like that is the one spot that still is wide open at the moment. Similar sentiment is true for the Browns and the Jets. So Vikings hanging out there as well. Falcons are supposed to bring in Tua. Rams, obviously, we have the reigning MVP. It's not a problem for this year, but you would think they might want to try to make a bigger investment for 2027 and beyond. And the Panthers, no one's taking Bryce Young's job. I get it, but they do want to upgrade from Andy Dalton as their backup QB. So really, Dwayne, again, it's Dolphins, Cardinals, Browns, Jets, and Vikings as the 5 teams that could have a week 1 starter that actually holds on to the job. I guess you can throw the Raiders in. We're kind of running out of quarterbacks, man. I think we're going to hopefully see some of these, Tanner McKees, Anthony Richardsons of the world start being traded soon, because at this point, man, Kyler and Geno, I think, are going to have a pretty nice market for themselves.
Yeah, I think it's Geno, potentially Derek Carr, right? Because he's talked about returning. Like, he's kind of in that same bucket, and we'll see what happens with Jacoby Brissett. But those are names that are probably all going to land somewhere. And I guess the other wild card is Kirk Cousins, right? Where does he end up starting? Probably he's probably going to be a starter somewhere week 1 with all the teams that you just talked about that are in need. So we'll see what happens. But to your point, like, not like we necessarily get super excited about any of these names. I do think that Geno probably has the most upside of the group because he can be that downfield passer. Derek Carr, I also like him as well. Like, he showed some nice things with the Saints. So, and obviously last year for fantasy anyway, like, Jacoby showed that he can support your weapons. Just wasn't necessarily, a winner at the NFL level. Not that that's all on the quarterback guys.
Let's move on to some wide receiver talks. We did have some big names being moved both across free agency and the trade market, but the biggest name of them all actually is staying put, and that is Colts wide receiver Alec PIerce back in Indianapolis on a 4-year, $116 million deal. Actually does include $64 million in guaranteed money. So congrats to Mr. PIerce on becoming a very, very rich man. Some of those per year numbers now are legit. Top 10 in the NFL. The total contract value, I believe, is even as high as the top 8. So again, always kind of a part of free agency. We get these big money deals, and then we find out, well, it's actually more of a 2 or 3 year deal with a team friendly out to get past it. But again, Dwayne, a lot of money for PIerce to now be maybe the wide receiver 1 in Indy, because on the other hand, what we saw was Michael Pittman traded to the Steelers in return for a late round pick swap. The reason why the compensation wasn't much because it was more so a just kind of shedding contract move. They saved $24 million in cap space by, again, sending Pittman to the Steelers. So Michael Pittman out, Alec PIerce is back. Obviously, we got Josh Downs there. They're going to need to add a wide receiver 3 of sorts, but I hope, Dwayne, it's no one really too big a value or, a bigger name, because at this point, we finally got a little bit of a condensed Indianapolis Colts offense. PIerce, Downs, Tyler Warren. I think the arrow's going up for all 3 of them at this point.
Yeah, I think Tyler Warren is the biggest winner here today. With Pittman leaving in the area of the field that he normally attacks, right, in the short and intermediate areas of the field, Tyler Warren was taking those over anyway last year, but now that's really going to flow through him. What will be interesting is with Josh Downs, can we finally free him in and let him play on the outside as a starter? I think he would be capable. I think the question for the Colts is, do they think he's good enough as a run blocker to keep him out there all the time? Because they are a very balanced offense. And obviously, when you have a back like JT, you want to feed that man. As far as Alec PIerce goes, look, man, one of the best, you could argue the best field stretcher in the NFL. I mean, he was wide receiver 27 last year in fantasy with 12.2 fantasy points per game, 10.1 the year before, yards per route run, career high, 2.10 last year. But still, man, targets per route run sitting at 17%. So for Alec PIerce, I didn't move him a lot on this signing today or the removal of Michael Pittman from the offense. I moved him up 3 spots in the wide receiver ranks. I really do like Alec PIerce. But I think he's going to still have to prove to us, can he be more than just a deep threat, right? Can he run more of the intermediate routes? Can he? And he did do some of that last year, guys. But can he get incorporated more into the short target game as well? Because that's what we ultimately need for him to have that wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 1 upside. So right now, I see him as a borderline wide receiver 3, going to give you some absolute boom weeks. But from an NFL perspective, I get it. You have a guy that can vertically challenge the defense at all times, but at the same time, I'm like, man, I'll be honest. I'm glad for Alec PIerce. I'm so happy for the Alec PIerce family and all of that stuff, but I would not have paid him this much money.
It's just one of those things, man, where it's the reality of the world, the salary cap in the NFL. But, when the Dodgers signed their 5th straight former MVP, no one's complaining about the money because the money doesn't matter in baseball, okay? They can just spend whatever. Yeah. Same thing with European soccer. I also don't know nearly as much as I do about those sports and football. So if I'm grossly mistaken, please let me know. But it is just a situation with PIerce where, again, 5 days ago on a rookie contract, we're like, oh, yeah, look at PIerce. Awesome field stretcher. Every offense could use him. And now that he's actually making bank, it's like, oh my gosh, what an overpay. I would kill myself if my team went ahead and signed Alec PIerce like that. So again, man, it's just one of those annoying but real ramifications of, looking at NFL signings through the lens of money. But from a fantasy perspective, I am with you, Dwayne. I do not think it's a situation where we can just zoom him up the ranks, because I do tend to believe in what you've been preaching over the years. You do earn your targets to some extent. And yes, while subtracting Michael Pittman is going to help, I would be surprised if all of a sudden, they're asking Alec PIerce to run all these underneath and intermediate routes. I think now he's getting paid. He should be perfectly fine getting his 85, 90 targets per year on the outside. Downs and Warren are the major contributors there. So did Josh Downs get a pretty big move up the ranks for you? I mean, it's not a situation where, we're not ranking him probably ahead of PIerce, but they could be squeezing that gap, before too long. A top 50 spot for Downs at least seems reasonable.
Yeah, he was at 165 overall in our flex rankings, and I think I have him up to 135 or 130 now. So he climbed 7 wide receiver spots. So I couldn't get carried away, because I think we still have the question, right? Will they really play him in 2 wide receiver sets? Or are they going to want to bring someone in that they think can, be a better run blocker and a more balanced, player because of the type of offense they like to run? But man, if Josh Downs does happen to end up in a full-time role, he's going to outscore Alec PIerce this year. I think you can just write it down. And it's not a shot at Alec PIerce. I like him. But Josh Downs, is just the kind of guy, Ian, and we've seen it, all of his underlying data tells us, his targets per route run, yards per route run, all those things, he could have a 25, 27% target share and we wouldn't be surprised. Like, I will be very surprised if Alec PIerce has a 25% target share this next year. Not saying it can't happen, and not that he can't be valuable in fantasy, but I just think Downs is a guy that could gobble up targets.
I just really want to see Downs get to week 1 healthy, man. Obviously, 2024, He had a grade 3 high ankle sprain in August. He had a toe and a shoulder injury shortly after. And then even last year, already was dealing with a hamstring injury throughout August. But he is just a tough mofo out there and managed to tough it out. So stay healthy. Keep that ice on Josh Downs. Going to be needing you more than ever here in 2026. Let's talk about Michael Pittman, though, to the Pittsburgh Steelers, Dwayne, because, again, it wasn't a big trade in terms of compensation, but it did come with the caveat that once Pittman was traded to the Steelers, he signed a 3-year, $59 million extension. So obviously an offense that beyond DK Metcalf didn't have too many avenues to go with the football in their wide receiver room. So I do think Pittman immediately makes us a better passing game. That said, it wasn't like we all of a sudden were already feeling good about DK Metcalf. Now we're adding someone else to that, and the targets are getting condensed. Michael Pittman, to me, feels like a wide receiver 4 where, hey, maybe he impresses. I wouldn't be shocked when you said Josh Downs outscoring Alec PIerce. I think Michael Pittman could outscore DK Metcalf for similar reasons. I think he could actually fit in better as a lower intermediate target with old man Aaron Rodgers throwing the football. But it is tough for me to craft like a super high upside scenario this year for Pittman.
Yeah, I agree. I moved him up like 3 spots in the wide receiver ranks because we didn't know where he was going to land. We were worried that he was going to get cut or he was going to get traded. What would happen, especially with all the talk that they really did want to re-sign PIerce. So we figured the money, might have to come from, knocking Pittman off the roster. But now that I at least know, Ian, that he's on a team where he's locked in as the wide receiver 2 in this landing spot. So that was enough to move him up a few spots in the ranks. But I'm like you. I'm like, okay, like we still have DK Metcalf there. We've got major questions about the quarterback situation. You've got multiple tight ends that they want to keep involved in the offense. But I'll say this. I think it clearly runs through, Pittman and Metcalf. But it's not like either one of these guys have been great fantasy performers over the last several years. They've been good. They've been fine. You're fine having them in your lineup, but they're not necessarily winning your league. I'll say this though, from like a personnel perspective, like I think it makes sense. Now you have somebody that can stretch the vertical boundary, and DK Metcalf. You can also hit him on the short slants, let him take it to the house kind of thing. But you're just really trying to hit that possession receiver, move the chains. You talked about Pittman's route tree and average depth of target earlier. Like they complement each other very well. So I think that's a big positive ultimately for the Steelers. We'll see what happens with the quarterback situation.
Pittman in 2021 finished as the wide receiver 24 in PPR points per game. Then he was the wide receiver 22, a peak of wide receiver 14 and 23. Fell off to the wide receiver 45 in 2024. But then we also found out he was playing through a freaking broken back throughout the season. Last season finished as the wide receiver 27, but was the wide receiver 16 before literally a 45-year-old grandpa came under center for the Indianapolis Colts. So again, more wide receiver 2 years than not for Pittman in recent history. But obviously with the new offense, quarterback questions, and the reality that, again, Metcalf still is the target leader. Going to be tough for us to rank them that high here as we get into our August drafts eventually. So let's talk about arguably the biggest wide receiver signing of the day, at least for those that were changing teams, and that is longtime Buccaneer, future Hall of Famer, I would say, wide receiver Mike Evans signing with the San Francisco 49ers, 3-year, $60 million deal. I personally always felt like this was his best potential landing spot based on kind of the criteria he gave us. Obviously, you have a great quarterback play caller connection with Brock Purdy and Kyle Shanahan. Minimal target competition, okay? Ricky Pearsall will get his, but Juwan Jennings and Brandon Ayuk seemingly on the outs. George Kittle coming back from the Achilles. And then, of course, the 49ers, for the better part of the Kyle Shanahan-John Lynch partnership, have been very much in Super Bowl contention. So great stuff here, Dwayne, as long as Evans and those freaking injury guys can figure it out. And I'll tell you what, man, I don't love going to San Francisco to be testing those guys.
Yeah, keep that guy away from the practice facility. I don't want him near like the electromagnetic field or whatever's going on, next door, the power plant next door to the 49ers practice facility. We got to keep Evans away from that. But I mean, he's going to be 33 years old this next year. This is kind of a surprising move. It does fill a need for the 49ers, but CMC getting up there in age. George Kittle is already up there in age, coming off an Achilles injury. You're trying to figure out what you're going to do with Trent Williams, who's an older player that's battled injuries over the last couple of years. It seems like they would have wanted to go in the direction of youth or maybe make a trade for a guy like A.J. Brown. Not that he's way younger than Mike Evans, but 29 instead of 33. But I'll say this. Last year, Mike Evans, even though he's battling through injuries, like he was still earning targets, Ian. 26% target yardage per route run, and that's in an offense that had Chris Godwin as well as Emeka Egbuka. You also had Cade Otton. You have some running backs that you like to throw the ball to. So still getting the targets, but it was a career low for him in yards per route run at 1.62. And these things can be so hard, like to kind of peel back the layers of the onion, right? Did the yards per route run come down because it was a dysfunctional offense for the second half of the year? Maybe some of that comes back to the play calling. Was it the injuries, some combination of those things? Or is it because Mike Evans is getting older? Or is it just a combination of all three of those things? I will say this. We know that Kyle Shanahan can scheme stuff up like crazy. So we have a guy that even though he's older, I still think he's going to be productive in fantasy. So I've moved him up inside the top 50, in the ranks. And I think if you forced me, it's going to be the cool thing, Ian, right? To rank a lot of these rookies ahead of a player like Mike Evans. But if a Girl Scout, we're bringing back an oldie, Girl Scout saunters to your door and says, Ian, you have to bet the future of your house on Carnell Tate or Mike Evans scoring more fantasy points this year, which one are you picking?
I think it's Mike Evans, man. I think everything is kind of setting up.
I do too, and I like Carnell Tate.
For sure. I love Carnell Tate. Go Buckeyes. But I think it's setting up so perfectly, Dwayne, for 2026 Mike Evans to look a lot like 2025 Devontae Adams.
Yeah, I agree. I think it can happen. Look, the age is the biggest thing with Evans. The nice thing is, guys, that's going to be what holds his average draft position down, right? So right now, I was brave enough, Ian, and you'll challenge me to move him higher. I moved him to 28 in the ranks today. So he's just behind Jordan Tyson and Carnell Tate. But he's above Terry McLaurin, Rome Odunze, those guys. So I've got him right there as like a borderline, mid-range wide receiver 2, but I could see getting him as high as like a borderline wide receiver, low end wide receiver 2. I think that's probably the ceiling for how high I could get him. But I mean, once you get to Zay Flowers, I can be like, Mike Evans could definitely outscore Zay Flowers. Mike Evans could outscore DJ Moore, who I've got at 22 now. Mike Evans could outscore Ladd McConkey, who's at 21. So I'm not saying we have to move him ahead of all those guys, but even though he's old, when I think about the range of outcomes, he could outperform all those guys.
I think that range, though, with Adams and DJ Moore as a low-end wide receiver, too, is probably about where I'll settle. I don't think I can get him ahead of guys like Devonta Smith, Zay Flowers, Jameson Williams, Luther Burden, guys that are in good offenses, and we actually have reasons to believe they're really good football players because that's what they've been in their short careers. But no, man, I mean, Carnell Tate and just, again, some of these rookies, you're right, we're going to be also tempted to push them up. There's nothing wrong with them. But just, again, we'll see how the landing spots get out. We got several more months, guys, to figure everything. But just this is going to be a great example, Dwayne, of Mike Evans, where are we ranking him for the season, and then where are we ranking him in week 1? Because once we get to week 1, man, it's like, oh, yeah, this is Kyle Shanahan and Brock Purdy's number 1 wide receiver. Oh, he went for 100 yards and a touchdown. Oh, now all of a sudden he's a wide receiver 11 going to week 2. That is very much on the table here.
Yeah. I mean, you can say the same thing for the rookies, to your point, depending on where they land. I'm working on the rookie supermodel right now. Just got finished with all the wide receiver write-ups. Those will be dropping later this week, guys. So I have to protect against this in my mind because I'm so deep in the weeds on all of these rookies. When I go to do the ranks, basically I'm ahead of all of you guys slightly on all of them. But I think it's just because I've been researching them so much. But I do agree with you. If Mike Evans comes out and has 100 yards and a touchdown in week 1, no one's going to care that he's 33 anymore. Now, you could flip it and say, yeah, but what's Mike Evans giving us later in the season? But here's the thing, guys. If he's healthy, it's not an issue. I've already done some of this research and we've talked about it, Ian. Looking at the last 2 years, some of the biggest performers over the last 4 weeks of the season at wide receiver have been old wide receivers. 2 years ago, no one will believe this, but Keenan Allen was averaging 18.5 fantasy points per game in the fantasy playoffs. All we want to talk about is how good the rookies were doing. But man, these old guys can also still be doing good at the end of the year.
And the trendy thing, too, and the stat that's going to be out there with Mike Evans is, he's only played a full 17 games one time in the last 10 years. Here are his games played, guys. Last year, messed up. Yeah. Definitely hamstring. You broke a collarbone. He only played in 8 games. Before that, 14 games, 17, 15, 16, 16, 13, 16, 15, 16, 15, 15. We're talking about usually, Dwayne, a couple games missed, usually because of a hamstring injury, which sucks. I prefer for him to play 17 games, but I feel with someone like Mike Evans, that injury possibility is going to be just a 10 out of 10 red flag in everyone's mind. Meanwhile, there's going to be guys next to him. We're not even adding a single shred of doubt to that, even though in reality, yeah, they also have a possibility of being injured. We are talking about football after all. So again, I have a feeling we'll be debating Mike Evans plenty throughout this offseason. Looking forward to that. But again, just overall, like landing with the 49ers, objectively, if you're in or out on Mike Evans, you really do got to be feeling like that's one of the better potential landing spots for him. I do think Dwayne's a similar sentiment for new starting Titans wide receiver one at this point, Wan'Dale Robinson, 4 years, $78 million with $38 million guaranteed to go ahead and be Cam Ward and Brian Dable starting slot receiver. So Calvin Ridley still on the team for now, but he does have one of those contracts where you start looking at the numbers. At this point, I would be surprised if he is back with Tennessee here by week one. So Wan'Dale Robinson, Dwayne, someone who's certainly stepped up in 2025, put much better film, much better efficiency stats on the table than what we saw in 2024. Again, similar to Evans, man, I think this is probably his best possible landing spot. Now, I'm not going to be ranking him inside the top 24 like I am Mike Evans, but Wan'Dale is someone where, again, inside that top 48, easy. And once you actually start crunching some of the projections, man, I wouldn't be surprised if you can argue he has even a bigger ceiling in full PPR than maybe we're giving him credit for.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a clear path to opportunity, right? You just got paid. You're going to be on the field. You've been a target earner for your entire career. You have a history with the coach. The big question will be, can Cam Ward take another step forward? And we definitely saw flashes with Cam Ward, but can we get the consistency from him to really unlock Wan'Dale Robinson? I think the most impressive thing about Wan'Dale Robinson, Ian, is that last year we saw his average depth of target jump from 5.1 to 9.1 from 2024 to 2025. And that really took him from being really just an underneath the coverage merchant, right? It's 3rd and 11. And I'm just going to check it down to Wan'Dale Robinson, 3 yards in front of me, and we'll just get off the field and we'll punt this ball and try to end our season, to actually Wan'Dale Robinson hitting those creases, working the deep areas of the field. And I actually like that match because Cam Ward, man, he will deal. Like he's not going to be interested in just taking all of these check downs. So I think the potential match is there if Cam Ward can take that step forward. Having said that, I didn't really move Wan'Dale up because I was kind of anticipating him landing somewhere where I thought he would get work. So I've got him in the wide receiver 4 range of the rankings right now. I'm slightly ahead of where you are, but I've got Wan'Dale, after updating his day, wide receiver 47. So I've got him in the same range as Jacoby Myers, Alec PIerce, Ricky Pearsall, who I moved down a little bit with Mike Evans signing, Chris Godwin, names like that. Jordan Addison, Stephon Diggs are all right there in that same range as well. So I think that's about where he goes. But could he be a wide receiver 3 instead of a wide receiver 4? Very easily. Like I think he's, this word's never good in fantasy, but he feels like a fairly safe pick if you're looking for floor. My question is, though, do we ever think he can turn into being more than a wide receiver 3, really, like to where, and in a way where we're like, oh my God, we're ranking Wan'Dale Robinson, in our top 10 every week, like that. See, that's the challenge with Wan'Dale. I think there's a really strong floor. We know he can earn the targets, but ultimately you hope to draft him as a wide receiver 4 and get to use him as your wide receiver 3. It's not that you think he's going to suddenly be wide receiver 15 in the ranks by week 3.
Yeah. Hey, depending on the league, 14 teams, you got 2 flex, 3 wide receiver spots. You probably will be pretty happy to have Wan'Dale on the squad. Absolutely. But, 12-team league, we're starting 2 wide receivers. We got 1 flex. That's more so a situation that I know a lot of us are in. And then, we probably aren't exactly going to be lining up to want to start this dude every single week. Happy you mentioned Ricky Pearsall. Forgot to mention, unfortunately, Dwayne, my 2-month trip of having him as a top 24 wide receiver has come to an end. So Ricky Bull is certainly going to be sliding down the ranks with Evans now in town. Just like someone who wasn't as high as Ricky, but Chimere DK, I do believe, Dwayne, we got to be a little more pessimistic about. Love the player, okay? And we don't have to be completely out on him. And Titans fans, who freaking cares what you're saying? Your offense and your defense spending some freaking money. You guys got better today. We needed to add people to Tennessee, and that is what matters more so for Cam Ward than anything else. But just, again, DK, Dwayne, the only guy that we could feel somewhat good about in this passing game, and I know Alec Manor does exist, but come on at this point. I just think that, again, bringing Wan'Dale in, it's going to make it that much tougher for DK. And I would be shocked, man, if they're done adding to their wide receiver room. This does profile like a team who could add, multiple on the draft day. So really, again, good for Wan'Dale, going to be in that wide receiver 4 conversation. Everyone else in Tennessee right now, man, I have even the running backs. Sounds like Jeremiah Love is in play at 4. Like no incumbent veteran starter on the Titans offense is safe right now, other than Cam Ward, obviously.
I agree. And I've got DK at 77 now. You're at 79. I'm not going to move him way down because I think he's in the 3 wide receiver sets, for Tennessee. I'm assuming that Calvin Ridley, that they're going to move on right now. If they end up keeping him, that'll change my view a little bit. I will say this. I do think that DK he actually showed in his collegiate profile that he can play outside. So he doesn't just have to be a slot player like what we saw last year. So I don't think this immediately means that, oh my God, he's out. He'll probably kick to playing the Z in, and I think that Alec PIerce will be the guy playing on the outside more as the X. What's going to be interesting is like, how do they split up the playing time whenever they're in two wide receiver sets? Because Wan'Dale did mostly play in those sets last year, and I'm imagining with them just paying him, he's probably going to do that as well in Tennessee. So it's going to come down to, is it a rotation between PIerce and DK? What are we doing? We've got a lot of other really great players to talk about here. We'll get more into the Titans later.
We'll get to some of those great players in a few minutes. But first, we got to talk about maybe the most surprising fantasy relevant signing of the day, and that was the Raiders signing former Vikings wide receiver 3, speedy Jalen Nailor, to a 3-year, $35 million deal with $23 million guaranteed. This really is one of those wide receiver signings that shocked me, Dwayne. Not that Nailor didn't make some great plays. He actually had enough for me to do one of my provocative Twitter videos with the NFL primetime music in the background. I like what he did, and it did seem like J.J. McCarthy, like there were long stretches where it was almost shocking how much he was able to get with Nailor compared to Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. So nothing wrong with Nailor. Raiders have money to spend. I get it. They need professional wide receivers in their organization, but $35 million, $23 million guaranteed for Jalen Nailor, Dwayne. Wow.
Yeah, this is an overpayment. Like, I don't understand this, especially with the draft class that we have. We've got a deep wide receiver draft class. Maybe not an elite blue chip prospect, but we have several really good ones. And they have a lot of guys that are going to go in day 2 and day 3. Ian, we'll have guys going on day 3 this year that probably would have been day 2 picks in some other draft. So I think there's a lot of depth here. And that's the main reason I really don't like this signing. It's nothing to your point against Jalen Nailor. Jalen Nailor, happy for you, happy for your family, glad that you got the bag. But I mean, the underlying data, Ian, I mean, you've looked at it. Like, I will say this, like, he's improved his average depth of target over his career. He was kind of seen as more of an underneath guy early, doing some yak stuff, but he has shown that he can attack vertically. So he does seem to have multiple gears to his game, but has never truly been like one of these guys that were like, oh my God, Jalen Nailor is going to change the direction of this game. He did make some big plays for the Vikings in some critical moments, but I mean, targets per route run, yards per route run, those things are all kind of tricky to look at because you're playing with Jordan Addison, right? And you're playing with obviously Justin Jefferson. You have TJ Hawkinson there. So I don't want to completely, just rain on his parade because of those kind of numbers. It's like whenever we look at Carnell Tate, and we adjust him in the rookie supermodel, we're like, well, play with Jeremiah Smith, play with Marvin Harrison Jr., play with Mecca Egbuka. Like, that kind of matters. That's basically the situation that Jalen Nailor's coming from, right? He played with other really good players. So I just want to say that when I look at him, I think he's a nice addition, but this is a lot of money. And my other question is, like, how does he really fit into the offense? I mean, you're already starting Trey Tucker. Dante Thornton was kind of a failed experiment. You drafted Jack Besh last year to really try to be your slot wide receiver, and that might be the best fit for Nailor. And Brock Bowers is also working the middle of the field. So I don't know. I'm kind of confused as to the overall direction of the Raiders offense.
I also am confused by the Raiders' tactics here to start off free agency. But again, could have been a situation where they had their eyes on guys like Pierce and maybe Mike Evans and Wan'Dale Robinson, whoever. And then all of a sudden they saw all these guys slipping. And then all of a sudden Jalen Nailor's market got that much more expensive. So no, I don't think that's very good team building strategy. But, I guess when you do add Nailor, it is, again, one better receiver than you had before, even if, again, it certainly does seem like an overpay. So would be very surprised if Nailor is going to be very fantasy relevant. Obviously, we need to see who the veteran quarterback they're going to sign is. Maybe Fernando Mendoza impresses. They did beef up their offensive line with Tyler Lindenbaum, which is good to see for Ashton Genty and company. But yeah, Las Vegas Raiders right now forking up some money for Jalen Nailor was not at the top of my bingo card today. Quickly, guys, before we move on to running backs, I did want to point out the Falcons signed former friend, Commander, and Eagles wide receiver Jahan Dotson to a 2-year, $15 million deal, and he will officially, Dwayne, be catching some passes from Tua Tagovailoa. He does plan to sign a 1-year deal with the Atlanta Falcons, giving the Falcons their 2 left-handed quarterbacks ahead of next season. So it's going to be Drake London. I would think with $10 million guaranteed, Jahan Dotson's probably going to be in 3 wide receiver sets. And they also brought back old friend Olamide Zaccheaus. So Dotson, okay, we can keep a candle on if we want to. Let's face it, you can also blow it out. And I'm probably not going to have a great comeback for you. But just, again, blow it out. Penix, Tua. I will say, man, the fact that they're adding Dotson and Zaccheaus, like, I don't care about them. Respectfully, all right, Zaccheaus has made some good plays over the year, and we've given him some flowers for that. But Drake London, man, Kyle Pitts, 150 targets each, man. It's setting up really nicely for these incumbent guys just to be target hogs right now.
This is good for them. And the other biggest takeaway here, because we are in rookie supermodel season, this is why draft capital matters so much. Jahan Dotson would not be getting his third opportunity, Ian, if he had been a third or fourth round pick. This is happening because he was a first round pick. And oh, by the way, he was one of the biggest reaches at wide receiver in the history of the rookie supermodel in round one. So he shouldn't have even been a round one pick, but one team decided they want to take him in round one of that year. And now he continues to see the dividends. But yes, you have the big takeaway, and that is Drake London, Kyle Pitts. Yes, yes, yes.
Guys, you could argue the most fantasy relevant action we actually haven't discussed yet, because we got some running backs moving around the league. We're going to talk about all that and much, much more here on the Fantasy Life Show. First, though, a quick word to our friends over at Xfinity. Guys, a lot can change in 5 years. Just ask Tua Tagovailoa. Remember, tank for Tua? That was an actual thing. But hey, guess what? The price of your internet will not change with Xfinity's 5-year price guarantee. Because again, sports unpredictable, but your internet price should not be unpredictable. You can get a reliable price for a reliable connection with our friends over at Xfinity. Again, giving you the chance to lock in 5 years of predictability. 5 years, the same price, no contracts or commitment. Because again, a lot can change in 5 years. We got players on new teams. Championships are won. Championships are lost. But no matter what changes in 5 years, the price of internet will be staying the same. Again, you can learn more at Xfinity.com. Note that's for specific plans only, and restrictions do apply. Kenneth Walker, the RB1 in free agency, y'all. Now a member of the Kansas City Chiefs. 3 years, $45 million with $28.7 million fully guaranteed. Patrick Mahomes' reaction on Twitter. Let's go. I love Mahomes' reactions. It's like, if you ever played like 2K, they show you the player, kind of just the most generic possible reactions to news on the side. I feel like that's Patrick Mahomes in real life. But regardless, Dwayne, this is something that shout out to the People's Insider Ricky. He was all over talking about, again, Walker potentially going to the Chiefs. It happened. And again, similar to Mike Evans and Wan'Dale Robinson, some of these other moves, I'd be hard pressed to name a spot Walker could have gone where his fantasy value would not be higher. Get this, Dwayne. RB6 for Kenneth Walker. I think it's in play. Tell me why I'm wrong.
I don't think you're wrong. I moved him to running back 7. So am I supposed to make an argument why you're one spot too high? Like, I can't argue with it. I mean, just look at the names around him, right? Like we've moved him ahead of Ashton Genty, right? Who we love, great prospect, but has question marks. Kenneth Walker's already shown that he can be a full-time back in this league. In fact, anytime that he's been able to take over the backfield, we haven't had Zach Charbonnet. He's been a running back 1 in fantasy football just 2 years ago, 16.4 fantasy points per game. You guys also what happened in the playoffs this year after Charbonnet went down. And here's the huge thing for Charbonnet not for Charbonnet, but for Kenneth Walker. It's just the fact, Ian, that people don't realize what a good receiver he is out of the backfield. Yards per route run, 1.44, 1.33, 1.30. That's running back 1 worthy if we go back to 2011 and look at running backs and their yards per route run. That's top 6 worthy. He's in the category of being one of the better pass catcher, one of the better receivers out of the backfield. Now, it's not like Mahomes necessarily wants to check it down all the time, Ian. He's wanting to look deep, but with the way defenses are playing, the construction of the Chiefs offense right now, I could see more passes to the back. And I think whenever we look at, Kenneth Walker, it's like, who's going to challenge him for opportunities here? One of the most explosive backs in the league, creates a ton of missed tackles forced. He's an electric player and an offense that we like. I think this is huge, for Kenneth Walker.
We'll see how things settle. They bring back Kareem Hunt and want to give him goal line touches a la Zach Charbonnet. That would be problematic. I would not.
You're not moving him in your ranks, though. You're not moving Kenneth Walker in your ranks, though, if Kareem Hunt signs. You're just going to go, yes.
I would not move him in the ranks, but we discuss it, and we could be cursing him out in week 1 if that does come to fruition. Brashard Smith is someone who flashed a little bit last year, okay, guys, but also never did enough to even come close to the Chiefs actually giving him a legit, chance at the role. Even though Isaiah Pacheco and Kareem Hunt were literally forming pretty much the worst running back room in the league. Again, trying to look at things like yards after contact per carry, I should say, missed tackles forced per carry, stats that should be as close to, independent on the RB as we can get. Chiefs were among the league's bottom 2, bottom 3 backfields in the entire NFL last year. So great upgrade there. And just, again, looking at the offensive scoring upside, I know it's the Chiefs and we haven't seen them be this top 5 juggernaut like they were from 2018 to 2022. too for a few years now. But Matt Nagy's out of the picture. Dwayne, we've at least gone ahead and shed that dude. I know Andy Reid's still out there calling plays, but again, just overall great news wheel up for Kenneth Walker. And I do think we had a similar thought process with where to rank him. So for me, it was like, all right, we're looking with the money and the 3-down ability, like a workhorse role for Kenneth Walker in the Chiefs offense. And then for me, it was like, okay, well, I'm moving him ahead of Saquon and Derrick Henry because I just don't think they had the same opportunities to catch a bunch of passes like K9. So then it becomes Genty, Hampton, Etienne. I would not quite put Walker in the Cook McCaffrey conversation. They just have, again, so much going for themselves, same offenses, like very rock solid top 5 running backs. But for me, it's like, of course I love the Chiefs more than the Dolphins. Of course I love them more than the Raiders. Hampton, we'll see what happens. Obviously, had some injuries last year. I could still see the Chargers add another running back. So I just think that offensive environment, Dwayne, it's a good tiebreaker for a running back that also might be every bit as good as guys like Etienne and Genty in the first place.
Yeah, I agree. I think you're completely right. I have Etienne one spot ahead, but you could also just argue that based on the trade potential rumors with Etienne, like if he landed with the Chargers, like we would have to downgrade Etienne because he's going to have to share carries with Omari and Hampton. So, I mean, there's just some weird stuff like that's just enough that maybe I should just move Walker to 6. But I think that range is the right range. I wanted to get him ahead of Genty. I wanted to get him ahead of Hampton. I have Muswell ahead of Saquon Barkley. And Barkley guys could easily come back and be like a top 3 running back next year. Like we're not saying that Barkley's going to be bad, but there's a pretty clear path here for what we have with Kenneth Walker. And you mentioned the main thing. It's the upside as a pass catcher. He had a 14% target share 2 years ago whenever he was the primary back for most of the season for the Seahawks. So people just need to get it out of their head that this guy can't catch. I know he didn't have a prolific year or a prolific career as a college player catching the ball. And it matters, guys. We care about that. But at some point, you have to let go of those priors and be like, well, every year he's been in the NFL from a targets per route run and yards per route run, he's been good. And then the 1 year that he had the backfield to himself, 14% target share. You give this guy 280 carries on the Chiefs and you give him 60, 65 targets, Ian, like it's going to be really hard for him to not be a top 5 back.
That said, guys, Kenneth Walker was not the highest paid running back of this Monday, at least in the total, contract value standpoint. That honor goes to former Jaguars running back, now Saints RB1, Travis Etienne, 4-year, $52 million deal on a per, year, just go ahead and basis. He's more of a top 5 paid running back when no one is making more than that $52 million that Etienne got from the Saints right now. So Saints also spruced up their O-line. They gave former Bills guard David Evers a 4-year, $61 million deal in his own right. So good news for Etienne. Dwayne, getting that sort of bag seemingly cements him as their 3-down workhorse. We also got word last Friday, I believe Nick Underhill reported it, awesome Saints beat reporter, that the Saints went ahead and restructured Alvin Kamara's contract in a sort of way that to me suggests that he probably has played his last down in New Orleans. I'm not sure if he's going to look elsewhere or perhaps just, go retire and sip some margaritas and do things like that. But again, be very, very surprised, Dwayne, if the Saints just go ahead and gave Etienne his contract just to pair him up with Alvin Kamara. So assuming Kamara is out of the picture, I think upside RB2 very much in the range of outcomes for Etienne. That's probably where I'll be ranking him as a top 16, maybe even top 15 running back. We have some concerns, and we talked about, before free agency started, how we did not consider Etienne to be in that upper tier with Kenneth Walker and then with Breece Hall before he got franchise tag. But still someone who's been very productive when healthy. And again, getting this sort of commitment, man, should have all the volume he can handle here down there in New Orleans.
Yeah. From an NFL standpoint, this is an overpayment for Travis Etienne, in my opinion. But at the same time, he is a back that's 5'10", 215. He can handle a full workload. He's never truly lived up to the potential we thought that he had coming out of Clemson, Ian, especially as a receiver out of the backfield. But he can handle the workload. He's never been that great inside the 5-yard line, but he's a guy that can be out there every down, and he still has speed. And it's just that it hasn't lived up to the potential we thought we were getting when he came out of Clemson. Obviously, injuries have been a little bit of a factor, but even from an NFL perspective, a talent perspective, this is a running back. This is like a running back 14 or 15 in the league profile. This is not someone that you pay top dollar to, but for fantasy, we don't care. We don't care. He just landed on the Saints. Like you said, we're probably moving on from Alvin Kamara. This is an offense that looked really good over the second half of the season with Tyler Shuck. Kellen Moore seemed to find his groove as a play caller. We'll see what they do at receiver, but there's rumors they could add to their room to go along with Chris Olave. So, yeah, I have him at running back 20. I didn't move Etienne. I just essentially left him. I felt like this was a neutral landing spot, but at a minimum, I feel like, okay, if Kamara's gone, he's getting all the touches here. So I think mid-range running back 2 is appropriate for Travis Etienne.
And I could see that RB20. Again, I was thinking RB15, given the benefit of the doubt of a few guys like Kyron Williams, Javonte Williams, but I can see the case for them as well. It's going to be, one good solid tier with those guys. I do think Etienne, Dwain, is probably going to be right there with those guys as kind of like that. That's our line. That's where we start having some concerns about some of these running backs. And again, so much still has to happen. I understand it. But Travion Henderson, Cam Scatterbu, Quinshawn Judkins, RJ Harvey, DeAndre Swift. Right now, it's underdog ADP. I mean, those are your RBs 20 through RB 24. So I feel like we start getting some very serious questions afterwards. At this point, though, man, we're looking at around 18, 19 running backs who are actively being invested in and seemingly have these legit RB1, 3-down-esque roles. I mean, that's pretty good, man. It's more than I can, remember here in the last couple of years in a league that beforehand seemingly was going more towards the route of a bunch of committees.
Yeah, and so I think there's a tier here with Kyron, David Montgomery, Travis Etienne. I think those guys are basically, and Javonte Williams. Those guys are all together, in my opinion, and they could end up finishing in any order. I think I still lean Javonte because I feel better about the stability of the Cowboys offense. We've seen it for multiple years with Dak versus what we get with the Saints. Yeah, we're happy about what happened down the stretch last year, but we also wouldn't be surprised if the offense fell apart this season. So I have less questions there. Kind of the same thing with Kyron, but I could see putting him above him because of your point. Like I feel better about, the potential to have like 75% of the snaps. Like we know Kyron's not getting that now because they've decided they want to make it more 60-40 with Blake Corum. And then David Montgomery, like there's offensive line issues, with the Texans, but I think he could easily outscore Etienne, but I feel like the same tier is probably right. And then you get into the tier above that where you get into your favorite guy, your Chase Browns, your Josh Jacobs, your Derrick Henrys, those guys. I'm still going to have those guys ahead of Etienne.
Handful of other running back sounding guys where I don't think they're necessarily going to be the main story here, but their impact on the offense is going to be a big deal here in Fantasyland. Starting off with the Broncos nearing an agreement to bring back Mr. J.K. Dobbins. Sorry, not sorry. RJ Harvey, truthers, he should have played better last year, and this maybe wouldn't have happened, man. So I do think, though, Dwain, like this is not a situation where I would just all of a sudden assume Denver is done adding to their backfield. We got reports that they actually were in on David Montgomery as well, and there are even some murmurs if they could be in the bidding war for a Travis Etienne or also a Kenneth Walker. So obviously didn't blow the bank. I would be surprised if Dobbins is getting too much money here, given his injury history. But again, it seems like a situation where I also wouldn't just assume Dobbins and Harvey are in the clear. Wouldn't be surprised if they go ahead and use another day 2 pick to spruce up their running back room.
Yeah, and I don't think this is the worst news for RJ Harvey. I think worst news would be if they also add another back. But I mean, if you had to pick what happened today, I mean, he avoided Kenneth Walker. He avoided a big contract to Travis Etienne. So I think getting Dobbins back on the cheap is actually can be seen as a good thing for RJ Harvey. Now, at the same time, J.K. Dobbins has been really good, man, despite the injuries. I know that's been a big thing for him, but man, yards after contact. Honestly, here's the thing. J.K. Dobbins, like as a pure running back, and no one's going to like this, he is a better running back than Travis Etienne. If we're just talking purely like, hey, I get the injuries, set all that stuff aside, and you just told me I had to go win a game tomorrow and I'm the coach or a GM and I have to choose between J.K. Dobbins and Travis Etienne and it's just that one game, I would take J.K. Dobbins. Like he has so many underlying data points that point to him being a running back 1 talent, where Travis Etienne has so many that points to being a running back 2 or 3. Now we know Etienne's going to get the volume, guys. It's great. Dobbins has an injury history. That makes coaches leery. He's going to be playing with RJ Harvey, who they invested in. But my point is that J.K. Dobbins is good at football, man. Like this guy is a good player. And people talk about, oh, he's so slow and he's not explosive. 14% of his carries went for 10 plus yards in each of the last 2 years. That's one of the best marks in the league. So you guys can say he's slow all day long. There are other things going on in football, such as vision, patience, power, getting past the second level. Maybe he doesn't have necessarily the best long speed, Ian, but I would say over the first 10 to 15 yards, he's still one of the best running backs in the NFL.
And hey, next gen stats, top ball carrier speed. Dobbins had a faster one than Travis Etienne last season. So
that is wild.
Who wins in a 60-yard race? Probably Travis Etienne. I know it's, you got to carry it out and do all that, but it really is wild. And again, the J.K. Dobbins disrespect will not happen here on the Fantasy Life Show. So I appreciate you sticking up for our boy there, Dwain. Weeks 1 through 10 last season, though, before Dobbins got hurt, okay, he had 164 touches. RJ Harvey had 75. I I think these sickos are still going to be drafting Harvey over Dobbins, Dwayne. I will not be one of them, though. J.K. Dobbins over R.J. Harvey. I'm just concerned they add someone else, and the answer ends up kind of being no, okay? Because let's face it, we've seen some incredible Sean Payton backfields. We've seen him pepper guys with targets. And, yeah, when it did condense around R.J. Harvey at the end of the year, he was great in fantasy land. But we've also seen a willingness to use not one, not two, but three running backs. And, again, I do have a feeling we do end up getting to that point, but still a lot more offseason to go. Want to get your thoughts, Dwayne, on another big running back signing, because unfortunately it is going to be impacting your guy Bucky Irving. Buccaneers signing reigning Steelers team MVP Kenneth Gainwell to a 2-year, $14 million deal. Rick Stroud also noted Rachaad White is not expected to return, and they have not tendered restricted free agent Sean Tucker just yet. So right now, looking like the Bucky Kenneth Gainwell backfield. And I would be shocked if Bucky Irving is not RB1, but we saw this happen last year, Dwayne. Like, Kenneth Gainwell does the little things like in the past games so right that it really could impact the ceiling here. So maybe I'm overreacting, but seeing Bucky as a top 15 running back, someone I was actively willing to draft in some of these early sicko ones recently, I think he goes down past that line, past the Travis Etienne's, next to some of those guys we have questions about. What say you?
Man, Kenneth Gainwell's better than Rachaad White. That's what I have to say. And I don't think it's particularly close. I think Kenneth Gainwell's way better than Rachaad White. So if Rachaad White was getting passing down work and rotating last year with Bucky Irving, do we really think that Kenneth Gainwell's not going to come in and do the same thing? I think he immediately takes over the third down work, man. And that's a big hit to Bucky Irving's, status. Now, this is the way we're going to project it. Chaos can happen. And if it does, Bucky Irving could easily be a top 6 fantasy running back. We know that he's got the talent to do it. But at the same time, like, Gainwell is so good in these areas, Ian. He's a very explosive player. 13% of his carries went for 10-plus yards 2 years ago, and last year, 15%. That's running back one worthy. We look at his targets per route run, 24%. He's a running back two in that area. If we look at his yards per route run, I mean, he's historically, he's had some years that weren't great, but last season, 1.47, and the Steelers kind of unlocked him. And that's what he was good at in college. So that really matches what he did as a collegiate player. And so I feel like the Steelers just kind of figured some of those things out last year, and they finally gave this guy a bigger workload than what we had seen in the past, and he paid huge dividends. And so when I look at this is not good for Bucky Irving. Does that mean we can't draft Bucky Irving? No. But you can't bury your head in the sand and just be like, man, I'm not going to worry about that. I'm not going to worry about Kenneth Gainwell. I mean, he's a good player, and they just gave him, in running back money, like giving anyone money like this, it's actually significant. So I think that Gainwell is a bigger challenge than Rachaad White was. That's my takeaway.
Definitely with you on that. So Bucky, no, he's not going to be, an RB4 or anything like that. I think he still very well could be in the top 24, but certainly going to be a squeeze with Kenneth Gainwell. And I wouldn't be shocked if it is even, 55-45, pretty evenly split as we get into 2026. Obviously, the other ramification is the backfield in Pittsburgh, perhaps belonging to Jaylen Warren a bit more strongly. Not completely throwing the towel in on Caleb Johnson just yet, but let's face it, we have pretty much not a single good thing to go off of after his rookie year. It is a new coaching staff, though, and I would be surprised the Steelers don't do anything to add another running back to that mix. But at least for one day, free Jaylen Warren calls certainly looking pretty good there for the Pittsburgh RB1. Another Dwain running back who's just going to kind of complicate things. I think this situation will be a bit worse than what we have in Tampa Bay, though, and that is the Arizona Cardinals signing former Falcons backup RB Tyler Algier to a 2-year, $12 million deal. So Algier, he's really demonstrated the ability to work across all three downs. PFF's second highest graded running back in pass blocking. He's never lost a fumble, did really good things before Bijan Robinson showed up in town. The problem is they restructured James Conner's contract, and he is going to be back in Arizona as well. Trey Benson is still there. So they signed Gardner Minshew, Dwayne, I guess, to compete with Jacoby Brissett in the quarterback battle that not a single person cares about. But Algier to the Cardinals, for me, it just really complicates things. I was hopeful that he could maybe find his way to a backfield that actually still needed a running back, or they would get rid of James Conner just to kind of feature things, but that does not seem like it's going to be the case. So again, Algier, Conner, Benson. Maybe someone will get injured. Maybe someone will still get traded. It is only March after all. But for right now, probably looking like a backfield to avoid.
Yeah, it looks like a committee on an offense that we're not that excited about. Now, when you get a committee like this, if they fall in average draft position, then that becomes something we want to target, right? And we will take shots on these guys. But we'll have to see, where does ADP end up as far as the way the market is looking at this versus the way we think it might really shake out. And then that's going to determine like how we're going to handle it. But it'll probably be one of those scenarios, Ian, where you're going to take the one that's cheaper. If James Conner costs less than Algier, that's who you're going to take in drafts. If it's Algier that costs less than James Conner, that's the one you're going to take in drafts. And obviously Trey Benson will probably, he's going to fall down the ranks. I did not update him yet. Actually, I did. I moved him down like 20 spots in the overall ranks on this. So we'll see. I don't think Algier is a special player, but man, he has size. He's been healthy. He's good around the goal line. We saw him be good enough to take carries away from Bijan Robinson, who is an absolute stud. So, I think he could definitely have a role here. And that would really hurt James Conner, because James Conner, that's really been his value, as he punches in the touchdowns. And he's really, James Conner is also a pretty good receiver out of the backfield, better than most people know. But maybe that means James Conner becomes between the 20s back, and he catches some passes, and then Trey Benson spells him. It could be an absolute nightmare.
And again, if they're all being priced RB40, RB44, RB60, Trey Benson or something like that, okay, then you're taking a guy versus clear-cut backups in other situations. Then we can get our minds around throwing that dart, because they actually do have more upside than the guys going around them. But just in terms of ranking it, okay, if you had to go ahead and sit down and say, these are the top 36 running backs I want for this season, wouldn't be surprised if, again, none of these guys involved are going to be making that list. So we'll see what goes down in Arizona. Only other running back note I have is that the Ravens actually are not tendering speedy running back Keaton Mitchell. So we will be seeing a new handcuff to definitely prioritize behind Derrick Henry in Baltimore. And we'll see where Mitchell ends up perhaps taking his talents in free agency. A couple tight end notes, Dwain, before we get out of here. First of which is another reunion. Former Ravens head coach, now Giants head coach John Harbaugh, has brought back old friend Isaiah Likely on a 3-year, $40 million deal. Apparently, because we heard rumors earlier last season that they were going to extend Isaiah Likely. Reports have since come out that they kind of realized it was going to be a little bit too expensive. And that's why the Ravens actually gave Mark Andrews that surprisingly steep bag here recently. Now Isaiah Likely getting $40 million again. Pretty surprising. Track record of tight ends getting these sort of big money deals in free agency and going elsewhere. Not too good. And we're also looking at an offense that does have at least a capable tight end one in Theo Johnson if they want. That said, $40 million to Likely is a situation where I would be surprised if they gave him that much money to, again, sit him on the bench. So I like the talent. Isaiah Likely before last year, which, by the way, broke his freaking foot in August, so maybe got to give a little bit of credit to that. Certainly someone who we'd be thrilled about getting a chance to go be a tight end one elsewhere, but it's also under the caveat that he's now following the same coach that never exactly gave him the full-time role in Baltimore. So a lot of different kind of angles to go with this. What's your initial reaction to it?
Well, I think it's a plus for Likely. I moved him up to tight end 15. I think he's, at worst, a mid-range tight end one. I do think this money signifies he's going to have a significant role. You just moved on from Wan'Dale Robinson, who's going to play in the slot and take those interior targets. Now Isaiah Likely can step into that spot, but he gives you a bigger body to do some of the things that they want to do on the ground. So it makes football sense to me. And I think that Likely, to your point, he's flashed enough at different points in his career as a receiver. He's somebody that we liked coming out of college that I can get behind it. I'm not going to get too crazy with it, but I think somewhere in that tight end, anywhere in 13 to 16 kind of range, I think Likely fits in there. I think the big winner here, though, is Mark Andrews, because he is a guy that we have seen over history whenever they've needed to. They've put him on the field, for a full-time role. Obviously, we've got a change in the coaching staff. Andrew's getting a little older, Ian, not doing quite what we were used to over the last couple of seasons, but part of that has been due to injuries and sharing time with Isaiah Likely. So I see a pretty clear opportunity for Mark Andrews to step into an 80% route participation role. You've got him at tight end 11. I've got him at 14. The wet blanket, Friedman, probably hadn't updated this yet, but he's got him at 20, which is just way too low. Friedman, if you're listening, you got to get off the treadmill or whatever you're doing and go change the ranks. So I think Andrews is the bigger winner here, but I have them right together. Tight ends 14 and 15 with Andrews one spot ahead of Likely.
Just to even more fully cement Mark Andrews in a true full-time role, Charlie Kohler actually signed a 3-year, $24 million deal to go ahead and join the other, Harbaugh lineage going on down there in Los Angeles with the Chargers. So, yeah, man, wheels up for Mark Andrews. I hear you're going to be that low-end tight end one where, no, I don't think we can expect, the 150 target boom season anymore. But who's to say he couldn't catch 10 touchdowns from Lamar Jackson? Certainly not me. So I hear you on Likely. It is just $40 million at the end of the day. And guess what? In that offense, man, certainly believe in Malik Neighbors and everything, but maybe a little bit slow coming back from that injury. We feel good about Jackson Dart. No Wan'Dale Robinson. There is a scenario where we look up and Isaiah Likely is really pushing for triple-digit targets.
Yeah, and the thing is, I just like the potential ceiling if they use him right. We don't know for sure how they're going to use him, but I could see him being a 22% target share player in the right situation. I don't see that for Hunter Henry, right? I don't see that for Brenton Strange, who I like. I don't see that for Juwan Johnson. I don't see that for Dalton Schultz. So I feel like once you start looking at those names and thinking, man, if things went right, and if I'm taking a tight end in this range, it means I waited. So I'd rather take an athletic receiving profile like Likely that could boom. He could bust, but he's also the kind of guy that I could look up and be like, hey, man, I got the tight end 6 and I waited. With those other guys, I feel like I'm going to be like, well, am I getting the tight end 12 or the tight end 27 this week? I don't know. I just got to start them every week. So it's just a situation where I just want to bet on the receiving profile. I don't want to get crazy with it. But once I'm in that range, I've got Ferguson ahead of him. I've got Andrews ahead of him. I've still got Goddard ahead of him. We're going to see where Dallas Goedert lands. I've got Kincaid ahead of him. But once you get past those names, man, I'm kind of in on him. We'll see what happens with Kelsey. Obviously, sounds like he wants to come back. I might bump Kelsey ahead of Likely if we hear that he's going to return. But I mean, Kittle's hurt. I mean, the other big name lingering out there is what's going to happen with David Njoku. Like, I could see myself moving David Njoku up inside the top 12, depending on his landing spot. Yeah. But outside of that, it's kind of, I'm looking at the board and I'm like, I feel like Likely's kind of got the most upside if things go right.
I like this one. I came in talking about Likely a little bit pessimistic. You have changed my mind. I'm feeling good about this spot. Isaiah Likely 2026, tight end 1 season coming to you. You did mention Travis Kelce. Not official word just yet, but he is expected to return to Kansas City. We can talk a little more about him when that is officially finalized. We did get a finalized news about Buccaneers tight end Cade Otton back in Tampa Bay on a 3-year, $30 million deal. So kind of happy he's there, Dwayne, because as we know, when their wide receivers are healthy, Cade doesn't do much of anything. So we don't really have to worry about him until about 2 or 3 of them drop, and then we can kind of get into that on our future waiver wire shows. Also, I know Titans continuing to sign Brian Dable's old friends in Daniel Bellinger, 3-year, $24 million deal. Good, solid blocking tight end. Good for the Titans for spending some money. And finally, the Falcons brought back old friend Austin Hooper, also Kevin Stefanski's old friend Austin Hooper, on a small 1-year deal. Again, they do have to employ other tight ends. It can't just be Kyle Pitts. I would think with that, again, minimal money and Hooper getting up there in age, not going to be too big of a thorn in the side of Pitts, but again, could be famous last words there. Tentatively not worried about for right now. So anything to say again on those, Dwayne's Kelce, Otton, Bellinger, or even old friend Austin Hooper?
No, the only thing I would say, I'm not going to worry about it with old friend Austin Hooper, but Kevin Stefanski, like, he does have a history of rotating tight ends when he has multiple. I'm not saying that's happening to Kyle Pitts, and I'm not going to move Kyle Pitts down the board. But if I am like kind of trying to connect dots, they could be the wrong dots that I'm connecting, guys. Stefanski, we have seen those years where he's willing to do that, so we can't completely rule it out. But man, with what we talked about earlier, I mean, we've got Jahan Dotson as your primary target competition. Olamide Zaccheaus. Yeah, I'm going to be wheels up for Pitts as well as London.
Dwayne, before we get out of here, we did get one last little info nugget from our friend John Gabadoro. The Cardinals' current intention is to keep Jacoby Brissett as their starting quarterback, with Gardner Minshew serving as the backup. So, Cardinals fans, I'm sorry, but in terms of just having a decent enough QB room, Dwayne, I kind of think it's similar to what we talked about with the Falcons. Jacoby Brissett and Gardner Minshew. No, I think we could both rank 25 quarterbacks who are better than both of them. But if you asked us to rank 35, 40, I think we're seeing both of them included. Like Jacoby, we saw what he did. Yeah, in garbage time. Yeah, in a pass-heavy offense. I get it. But we saw him enable Trey McBride and Michael Wilson, even briefly Marvin Harrison Jr. to some very fantasy-friendly heights. And then Gardner Minshew, man, like he is one of those backup quarterbacks where he can still go out there and give you 290 yards and a couple of touchdowns. And yeah, probably stink the next week because he is a backup quarterback. But Jacoby and Minshew, Dwayne, I personally now just knowing kind of that's what they're planning on rolling with, I feel better about going after guys like Michael Wilson and Marvin Harrison Jr. now.
Yeah, and it makes Trey McBride feel more like a safe pick because he's expensive, right? And so if there was any question that maybe it could be worse than Jacoby Brissett, that was going to be a potential issue for Trey McBride. We're all in on taking these talented tight ends, but if you guys haven't been drafting yet, Trey McBride will cost you an early second to mid-second round pick. So people are definitely in. So I think this is big for him. And I do think it's also big for Michael Wilson and potentially Marvin Harrison Jr. To your point, I mean, whenever Marv started to go off before he got hurt, it was when Jacoby Brissett got into the lineup. Then the injury opened things for Michael Wilson. So he does just seem to jive with all of these guys. So I think this is a big positive for their fantasy value this season. Obviously a different offensive coordinator. We've got some changes going on there. So we'll keep track of that. But overall, this is positive for the Cardinals in fantasy football. Sorry, real life Cardinals fans.
Cardinals QB situation apparently now resolved. Again, we'll see what goes down with Cleveland, with the Jets, and some of these other squads who still need to find QB1. But guys, guess what? When we do figure that out, we'll be right back here on the Fantasy Live Show, letting you know throughout the week. Back Tuesday and Wednesday, 4 p.m. Eastern, with more live shows, breaking down anything and everything going down in the free agency streets. So appreciate you guys tuning in. As always, if you like the show, then please like the show. Hitting that subscribe button always helps as well. So for Dwain, for producer Matt, for producer Kelsey, I'm Ian. Thanks again for tuning in. Until next time, take care, everybody.